You know, last week we celebrated the resurrection of Jesus. And in turn, you celebrate that every Christian has this sure hope of eternal life.
Amen.
That's why we do this,
Yeah.
all right? If we didn't, our faith is a waste. I mean, we're wasting our time if this is just to be good people who stand out for just a couple of years in this fading world. We're in this for eternal life.
Amen.
And Jesus gives us that eternal hope. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to venture back in time, 500 plus years before Jesus came to this earth. What we're going to read about today is a story Jesus would have heard growing up. And of course, he's always part of the story, right? But I'm talking about his time on earth. We're going to venture back 500 years before Jesus. Today, we're going to talk about a man that foreshadows Jesus and his resurrection. The prophet Daniel. Let's read Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased King Darius to appoint 120 governors to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The governors were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the governors by his exceptional qualities, that the king planned to set Daniel over the whole kingdom. Let's stop there for a moment. Give some context. If Daniel lived today, he would be one of those YouTube videos of social injustice and the bad things that could happen to someone in this world. He would be a video that we would all be watching and talking about. It would get many views, many likes, many hits. You see, as a Jewish teenager, the Babylonians invaded Jerusalem, burned it down, destroyed the city, and they took Daniel and many others like him away from family and friends. So those that survived and were deemed useful to the Babylonian kingdom, someone like Daniel, he was taken away and made a slave. As a teen, Daniel would never see his mom again, his dad, his family, and he would be blessed just if he had a few friends that he knew that went into exile with him. We're talking about at the age of Ewan or Megan. All right? Daniel was forced to learn a new language. He was forced to learn a new culture, a new religion. He was taken away from everything that he ever knew. And more than likely, the reality of this, and for men or young men like Daniel, because he was a foreigner and because they were eliminating the Jews and destroying Israel and they were being absorbed by Babylon, more than likely for men like Daniel, they were castrated. So, on top of all of that, the humiliation and the reality that he could probably never start a family. The family line was done.
Wow.
Daniel had no temple, of course, no worship to go to, no church service to depend on, no midweek, no small group to speak of. He didn't have that fellowship with other believers. He had to go and find it. It wasn't built in for him. What a horrible existence. How unfair. Daniel had everything stripped away from him as a teen, and he was put to work in a foreign country. Now, fast forward 70 years. Here in chapter 6, Daniel is around 80, 85 years old now. The Babylonians have been conquered by the Medo-Persian Empire, and somehow, some way, we know it's God, Daniel has survived, and not only has he survived and not been killed by the new king, he begins to thrive. You cannot keep God's man down, no matter the circumstances. So what's happening here is not only has Daniel made it through a transition from the Babylonians to the Persian Median Empire, but he's beginning to thrive. And King Darius, the new king here, he appoints Daniel as one of his 3 vice presidents over the entire kingdom. Imagine the scope of this. And so Daniel does so well as one of the vice presidents, as one of the 3 men in charge of the entire empire. He does so well, the king now plans to make Daniel his #1 prime minister. Now let's read what happens next in verse 4. At this, the administrators and the governors tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. So finally these men said, well, we're never going to find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Politics as usual. Same today. Not much has changed. Leaders get jealous, they're in competition, they resort to digging dirt on one another. But here's the challenge for them. They could find no dirt on Daniel. He's 85. They had a lot they could look into. Even in a change of kingdoms and being loyal to his work when Babylon was in charge, then everything changed. And it's a new government. It's a new system. They can't find anything on him. That's so unusual. No matter how much his enemies picked apart his life, no one could discredit Daniel. And we're not even talking about within a religion. We're talking about in the greater world. He is a political leader without corruption. Have you ever said this? Has this sentence ever come out of your mouth? I don't know that I've said that too many times, save for Daniel. He is a political leader without corruption. Daniel is trustworthy and not negligent. So when Daniel is given a job to do, the king knows that Daniel will do it thoroughly with excellence. Nothing would be left undone. Could your coworkers say this of you? Could your classmates in school say this of you? Could your classmates, could your school teachers say, man, there's no shortcuts in this student, no corruption. This student, my student, works hard and takes no shortcuts. Could your bill collectors say this about you? You know, those bills that come in the month, every month, you know, come in. I mean, would they say that about you? No negligence, no corruption. Could your enemies say this about you? Man, this man always pays his bills on time. This woman always pays back the money she owes. Now that's so challenging, right? But that is not the exception if we follow Jesus. It's the norm. Yeah. That's what we're called to be. And Daniel is such an amazing foreshadowing of Jesus and the integrity of Jesus. Let's keep reading in verse 6. So the administrators and the governors went as a group to the king and said, O King Darius, live forever. The royal administrators, the prefects, the satraps, the advisors, the governors have agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree. Put it in writing so it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So, King Darius put the decree in writing. So the enemies of Daniel, they set this trap for him. They used his relationship with God against him. See, they couldn't find any worldly means. He was such a man of integrity. So they couldn't break that down. So they had to resort to this path to take down Daniel. They used the pride of King Darius against him. So no more prayer. No more prayer to anyone except King Darius. And so if I'm Daniel and I hear this, I'm thinking, man, I'm 85 years old, man. This has been a long life, God. This is more of the same. Where are you, God? I mean, I'm trying to pray to you and you're letting these men shut that down. Do you care, God? Do you care specifically what's happening to me? Why are you letting this happen? This is not fair. I must complain about this. Let me get on my Facebook account. I gotta tell people, this is wrong. The community must know. Let's see how Daniel responds in verse 10. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, okay, watch this. How did he fight injustice? How did he deal with this? How does he take his stand against unfairness? When he learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. Really, there is no Jerusalem anymore at that stage. He's just looking towards something of the past that he hopes could be revived. So he opens his window toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. That's key. He gave thanks to God, he prayed 3 times, but it's just as he had done before. Verse 11, then these men, they went as a group and they found Daniel praying and doing what? Asking God for help. Verse 12, so they went to the king and they spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den? Let's bring the BBC cameras over. We got to see that. We got to watch this. We got to see what's going on. This is news at 6 o'clock. So let's get the cameras in there. Let's get a report. Daniel is disobeying the king, disobeying the law. So the king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, well, Daniel, and they point out his background here. All right, this guy who's not one of us, he's an outsider, he's a foreigner. Daniel, who's one of those exiles from Judah, well, he pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing, and he still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group again to the king and said to him, remember now, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So how does Daniel fight injustice? How does he fight against something terrible happening in his life? He just does what he already had been doing. There it is right there. End of verse 10, he did just as he had done before. He fought against this the same way he did for 70 years. He does just as he had done before. He opens his window toward Jerusalem, his home as a child that's now destroyed. He gets on his knees and he prays 3 times a day. He asks God for help. This is nothing new. It's just as he had done before. And that begs the question, when trouble comes into your life, what will trouble find you already doing? When trouble comes in your life, and trouble will come your way, when trouble comes into your life, what will trouble already find you doing? Tomorrow, when you wake up and trouble comes, what's trouble going to find you doing? When it happens later this week, or you're tired Wednesday afternoon, whatever it may be, what's your pattern? What is your just as he had done before way of life? See, this is the difference between living your Christian life being reactive versus being proactive. Here's what I meant. This is what I mean here is for men like Daniel, and certainly Jesus, who's the ultimate example of this, the key is not learning how to spiritually react to tough situations, but instead, the key here is that these men are proactive. They live by the Spirit every hour, every day. Not just when trouble comes, they're looking for the Spirit. They're already living by the Spirit. So when challenges come, they do just what they've always been doing. They stay spiritual. So there didn't need to be this special plan. Because trouble is all around us, brothers and sisters. It's waiting for you all the time. Temptations, tough circumstances, a hard life, things we disagree with that are difficult, unfairness. It's waiting for you. What will trouble find you doing? And for Daniel, we know he had this proactive prayer life 3 times a day, every day, connecting with God, asking God for help. And these are not boring prayers. And we have evidence of this. These are prayers full of passion. Look at this one in Daniel 9. This is a typical prayer of Daniel. And I do think it's crucial for us, especially as we get older, well, just all ages of Christians, but I think for me, now 18, 19 years in the faith, I need to look at the prayers of these men and women in the Bible, and are my prayers similar? Or am I just praying the same stuff about the same things? We need to copy these prayers and make them our own so many times. It's all throughout the Bible. Daniel is a man of prayer. In verse 18, he says to God, "Give ear, O God. Listen, God, and hear. Open your eyes. See the desolation of the city." Speaking of Jerusalem. The city that bears your name. We do not make requests of you because we're righteous, but because of your great mercy. These prayers, we're coming to God and we're saying, God, I don't deserve this, and it's not because I did this, this, and this that this should come, but remember your mercy. Think of me today, God. When you think of me, show your great mercy. Verse 19, O Lord, listen. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hear and act. For your sake. That's the challenge too, right? Act, Lord, mostly for your sake. For your reputation, for your name, for your sake, oh my God, do not delay because your city and your people bear your name. Now look at verse 11 of chapter 6. Even Daniel's enemies know about his prayer life. And it's not like he's the Pharisee out there in the middle of the street beating his chest and I'm so awesome. Alright? They know that he's close to God and this is what he does. And even when they found him, like, yeah, he's still praying 3 times a day. They knew it. They go as a group, they find Daniel praying, they know where to go, they know when to go, they even can hear what he's praying about. They're listening and they're like, yeah, he's asking God for help. And he's going to need it. We're going to get it. So Daniel's devotion to God is not a secret to non-religious people. These are the people he interacts with every day. Could we say the same thing? And it's not about showing it off. We're talking about doing as you've done before. And if you do as you've done before for a long, long time, the people who know you best, that interact with you, they know that you do this. You don't have to make a point to show them. It's just, it's what you do. It's who you are. It's who your best friend is. It's what you depend on. It's your bread. It's your air that you breathe.
That's right.
Remember, Daniel has no Saturday Sabbath that he can observe at this time. That's done. There's no Sunday church service that he can be known to go to. The temple is destroyed. There's no religious activities, no church calendar.
Yeah.
There's no Google he can go to and say, when can I get with the church? But his co-workers know who he is and what his life is all about. Now back to the text. Let's keep reading here in verse 16. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him into the lion's den. Then the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." That's the reputation of Daniel from the top. From the man who ruled the kingdom. He says, "May your God, whom you serve, how much? Continually, rescue you." The king says to Daniel, "May that God of yours that you are with nonstop rescue you from these lions." Verse 17. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. Now, where have we heard that before? All right? A stone was brought in and was placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. And that's situations that we can face all the time, right? The world is telling us this situation is not going to change. There's no hope here. So we got to use some of the world's solutions to try to change it, right? But it says, hey, the situation is not going to change. In verse 18, then the king returned to his palace, and he spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel." Listen how this pagan's talking here. I love this. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." Verse 23, the king was overjoyed, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him. Why? Because he had trusted in his God. And maybe all of this is just a simple lucky break. Maybe the lions weren't hungry at this time. Verse 24. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. So if there's any question, this is a pagan nation. This guy that's praising God acknowledges that God is a living God and that what Daniel was doing was very real. Okay, but what he's doing here is very real too. Daniel's out. We're putting these men in there and their wives and children. So the lions were hungry because before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. It's worth imagining the scene for a moment. It's gory, but this really happened. This is not just a fun children's story to do a craft with. Men, women, and children died, and they died with their bones getting crushed.
Yeah.
Verse 25. Then King Darius, okay, not a believer here, okay? Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, the nations, and men of every language throughout the land, May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I decree that everyone must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and saves. This is not David the psalmist saying this. This is God working in a pagan king. The same thing happened with Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Right? Nebuchadnezzar started praising God after he grazed on grass for a while and was humbled. All right? And so, look at this. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So when God decides to lift up his man, watch out. When God decides, when the time is right to reveal himself to the world, watch out. God accomplishes his plans in spite of any human opposition. Amen. So Daniel prays just as he had done before. We're talking about a man that's 85 years old. At least 70 years in captivity. And he just keeps praying. He prays just as he had always done before, and God sends one angel, and that one angel shuts the mouths of the deadly lions and saves Daniel. If one angel can do this mighty deed in the life of Daniel, what about our lives? What about us? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? And I'll conclude with this question. Think on this in the upcoming week. Are you living your life in such a way that's worth telling stories about? Specifically your Christian life. Are you living your Christian life right now that's worth telling stories about? $600 million has been spent worldwide already on Endgame, the new Avengers movie. And I'm going to spoil it for you right now. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't seen it. But that was my son's birthday present. He and Ewan went to watch it Friday afternoon. And we had to rush down there and make sure they got a seat, bought tickets in advance. Everyone's talking about this. It's a story. Everyone wants to know. You know why everyone's buying this and wants to see it? It's an amazing story. Yeah. It's about 100 stories wrapped in one. No one wants to hear a story about church attendance.
Yeah, come on.
All right? I'm just telling you, that's not going to inspire anyone. We're not going to go watch Endgame and it's people sitting in green chairs. All right? No one wants to hear those types of stories when there are mouths of lions to be shut in our lives.
That's right.
So you have to think, what am I doing right now to please God? Am I living such a life where there's going to be stories happening of what God is doing? We spent 3 weeks in Florida, and it was so encouraging because we had so many stories to tell. Privately, publicly, and it was energizing to us. I mean, stories about the lifestyle here and being a missionary in a foreign country. How many non-Christians that we've had in and out of our home in the last 3 years. Stories of teens in our church becoming Christians.
Amen.
And it's not just that, it's the stories of heartbreak. The stories of waiting. Even more of that, of just the waiting that makes your heart sick to see something else, something grander, the vision that you have, and just sharing that with other people. But even being in the game and in the fight, it gives you stories to talk about. I didn't go over there and tell people and boast about coming to church every Sunday. Or somehow, I made it to midweek this week. I was tired, but I did it. Yes, self-denial. But there are stories waiting for you. It's not just the first 10 years you were a Christian, or when you were single, or you had this lifestyle, or you were on the university, or doing this or that. Now must be the good old days.
Amen.
Will you be able to look back on now and say, those were the good old days? Are you living your Christian life in a way that's worth telling stories about? People love a good story. They love an adventure. People love a story where everyone is dead at the end of one movie and then somehow we have another movie. Sorry to spoil it for you, but I mean, something had to happen to have another movie. Everyone died in the last movie. But see, that theme also is in us. We have true life. There has been a resurrection in us. Do you want to make an impact on this world? It is within your grasp. Ephesians 5:10, you find out what pleases the Lord.
Amen.
Don't wait for someone to tell you. Ephesians 5:10 says, find out what pleases the Lord in your life. And like what happened to King Darius, God will reveal himself in his time. And the world around you will take notice. We must believe in something greater than ourselves. We must believe in someone greater than ourselves. The stakes are high, not only in this lifetime, but also the next. Because when this life ends for each one of us, we will all appear before the Father.
Right.
And according to the Bible, none of us will hear him say on that day, well said, faithful servant, well said. And none of us on that last day will hear from God, well studied, faithful servant, well studied. But instead we all long for the Father to reward our faith by saying this, well done, good and faithful servant, well done. Rise up, O men of God. Our best days as Christians are right in front of us. Amen.